Welcome to the War Academy podcast. The War Academy is dedicated to collecting and disseminating knowledge and elevating the level of gameplay in Squad. We hold frequent training events, create educational media content, and host numerous programs aimed at assisting new and seasoned players alike. Whether you're looking for organized or casual play, the War Academy has something for you. For more information, join our Discord, subscribe to our Steam group, and subreddit. This is episode 1 of the Metanalysis series of the War Academy podcast. I'm your host, Tartantyco, and with me today is suspected Australian Cheezy Scrub. Also joining us is Karmakut, a frequent Squad media content creator and founder of Squad Ops. Squad Ops holds organized scenario events focused on giving players an immersive, realistic, and tactical gameplay experience. They have an upcoming event this Friday, June 24th at 2000 UTC and at 2000 Central US time. Visit squadops.gg for more information. The topic of today's meta-analysis episode is FOBs. There's been some recent changes to the FOB now. The resource ticker has slowed down considerably, so it's harder to get enough resources to build fortifications, to build ammo dumps and all that kind of stuff. We've also introduced the 50 cal. It's the first actual employable weapon. It's seen limited use of so far. Currently, the way I'm most familiar with seeing other people use the FOB is basically the entire team just runs out of the main base all the way up to the front line, and then when they get into contact or like the central flag, they drop a FOB down there, and that's about all people do. There's occasionally one or two more FOBs coming up or something like that, but I usually see very often teams relying on a single FOB, maybe two at most. Is that how you guys experience this as well?
Yeah, it's basically used as a team rally point at the moment, which I think is kind of problematic. But yeah, that's exactly right. It seems that the two teams have that point of contact in the middle and eventually figure out one FOB from which the entire team spawns, and it's sort of a brick wall as each team hits against each other. From pretty tactically limited at the moment, but you know, that's to be expected considering how young the community is, I suppose.
Yeah, I'd like to think of the FOBs being used right now as kind of like an extension of the main. Aside from spawning, it doesn't really have that much use. I have been seeing some really interesting tactics with the FOB though, and some of these tactics I even use myself is putting down a FOB at your defense flag and then putting the offense FOB near the central flag of contention within the build radius, but not on top of the flag. And the reason for this, I think, is because it does allow some freedom with building. As you're fighting on that middle flag, the FOB back on your defense point is building up points, so you can always go back there and fix them.
Usually how I use the FOBs is basically I focus a lot on building up a FOB network, so I start dropping FOBs from the moment I leave the main base, basically. I like seeing FOBs within like 200 meters of any flag that exists on the map. Preferably multiple FOBs supporting each flag.
Mm-hmm.
So you have like one north of the flag, one south of the flag, or something like that. So flanking FOBs. And I drop them like as close to that 400 meter limit as possible, approximately 200-300 meters away from any flags like that. And I think that's something I really don't see a lot of within the community, that building of FOB networks from just this from the moment you get out of the main base there.
I think there's the reason for that is at the moment with how the current meta works is that you need more people on the central flags faster than the enemy can get there. So I think that's just sort of a result of how the game's playing out at the moment, more than it is with people being or lacking imagination. But as you said, building up a spawn network is absolutely critical. Building up a team spawn network, I should say. So you can always rely on your own squad rally point, but another squad can't spawn on that, obviously. So I think at the moment, the way I like to play it is, if my squad has the majority of players, like if it's got 9 players in my squad and there's another squad with 9 players, then we'll always ask the squads following up with fewer players to place down those sort of backup FOBs, and that takes care of both having enough players in the center of the map where it matters and also building up a spawn network at the same time. And by asking another player to put down a FOB at a back cap, you sort of introduce them to that concept of building up a network. So I think that's a good way to go about it at the moment.
Yeah, I feel like it's got a lot to do with map size as well, and that speed to get to that first cap that you're gonna be fighting over. For example, on maps like Kohat or Fool's Road and even Gordok, you're more likely to see more FOBs used as that spawning network, whereas on OP First Light, Sumari, teams will kind of only rely on one FOB, so I do think there's a pretty strong relation in the number of FOBs depending on the size of the map, and I guess that's a logical conclusion to come to, simply because there's more ground to cover, so why not put more FOBs, and there's less chance of that FOB being found.
Yeah, especially on Sumari Ball, I think that was like ahead of 0.6, it was like you have one FOB and it's usually in the center of the map. Yeah, and how do you guys, are you guys using the construction a lot? I find myself rarely using any kind of fortification or anything like that. I drop an ammo crate or two, and that's about it.
Yeah, so I'm not that kind of player, so I'll always drop an FOB in a position where it's not likely to be discovered, and then I'm not going to sit there and build up any defenses. Particularly at the moment, I mean, the points generation sort of prohibits that in any meaningful sense anyway, but even when we see the introduction of logistics and crates, I'll always be the player to sort of put an FOB down and then move on. I'm much more concerned with sort of having the spawn there but taking the initiative and moving forward. So no, I don't usually use constructibles. I did recently have a good example where we employed a 50 cal though, so I've only seen that work actually once or twice, but I think that's more people putting them in spots where they think the enemy is going to be, rather than thinking about that critically as well. But yeah, I can't say that I'm a defensive type of player, so I don't really use the constructibles.
I simply I just love building FOBs. Now the key to that though is knowing the timing, getting the timing down, especially with this most recent patch. The point buildup is the main limiting factor in building proper FOBs. So I think the kind of strategy for building FOBs now is either to put the FOB down early, or to kind of time it so that if you have put up a defensive FOB, by the time you have to fall back to it, you do have some points. Now, when I build on the offense, what I'd like to do usually is drop a FOB way far advanced on their next flag, and then kind of fall back and fight over that middle flag, and then by the time we make it to their offensive cap, we can drop a 50 cal and some sandbags. So I kind of do enjoy building just because it's more fun. It's just, I think it takes a lot of game experience and game knowledge to know where to put the FOB, where to put the buildables, and that just comes with experience. But yeah, I think building is like one of the best parts in this game. But you just gotta be careful. You just gotta know what you're doing and make sure you don't, bog down your whole team fighting over a useless super FOB.
What you mentioned is actually a very good part of the current meta, simply because squad leaders can literally place a FOB pretty much wherever they want. But that is, if you happen to find yourself in a position where you can get around the enemy and put a more advanced FOB down that's behind their line and near the next flag, I think that's always a really good thing to do. Even if you don't use it for 10 minutes, and even if you don't simply leave it there for the points to accrue, but you use it later on as an advanced position to then attack the next flag. I think a lot of players will always take these wide flanking maneuvers to attack the next flag in order, but while they're out there, they seldom take the opportunity to then put down a FOB in a more advanced position. I think that's critical at the way it works at the moment. I mean, you're silly not to do it. Obviously, you don't need a truck to get anywhere. Yeah. So, yeah, seeing players put down those advanced FOBs when the opportunity presents, I think that's really good.
Yeah.
Obviously, you just got to be cautious where you put it. I mean, you don't want to put it where the enemy's coming from, but yeah, that's good karma. I like that tactic as well.
Yeah, it's all about increasing your options, pretty much.
Plus, it's a nasty surprise when you have half a team spawn in the position where the enemy didn't even think you were.
Yeah, that can be really good in when you have those leapfrogging advances where you just start railroading the team, and when you have a fob already advanced there, and you can just spawn in onto the next flag. That can quickly lead to a defeat for the other team. But you mentioned super fobs, by the way. Gone down a little bit in prevalence in the game since the last changes. But have you guys seen any of those pop up still much?
Well, I think happily I haven't seen too many of them pop up. I know there's a couple of regulars around on the Australian servers that insist on putting fobs in the middle of flag points, but no, I'm pretty ardently against the concept of a super fob. I know, Karma, I had no idea that you enjoyed building so much, but it'll be good to have this sort of little counterpoint here, I suppose. But I think there's a time and a place for a super fob, and at the moment it's just not feasible, at least not in the way that I see it done most of the time. So I'm glad the prevalence of it has gone down, but I think that's been more contrived by the developers limiting the potential for a team to do it rather than a change in any of the gameplay meta, to be honest, because I think people would still do it if they could.
Yeah, I see in Squad there's a very big gap. You have the fobs that are not built up, and you almost will never see a decent fob. Like, you'll either see a super fob or you'll see no fob. And I think there's a lot of balance changes that have to be made, because you don't really see oh wow, look at that fob, it's not a super fob but it's a normal fob. Because before this patch you would see super fobs, like the compound's locked down and there's 50 sandbags on all the walls and every door is closed off and you have 10 ladders going out. But now it's just it's either a really defensive fob in the tunnels or something of Fool's Road, and they're building up the tunnels and stuff, or you'll see a single 50 cal and it's just that's what fobs are right now. They're not really a base or anything. It's just I don't know, it just feels really awkward right now, and not there's plenty of room to work with, and I think further down the line they'll definitely nail this problem. But yeah, I don't really see many super fobs right now.
Yeah, well, personally I just rarely build anything except demo jumps, because I think the time you spend either sitting on the fob waiting for resource points or spend building and placing and all that stuff is time you could have spent effectively for something else entirely, because I find any kind of static defense to be pretty useless in the game. I just find that with a grenadier you can easily barrage, and RPGs you can easily barrage those positions, and when you know where the enemy is, it's really easy to encircle them and so on. And I just don't find any good maneuverability when you're trying to defend from single point.
That brings up a really good point. Now you say that fobs are really easy to take down, and especially defensive fobs. I completely agree with that. It's easy to encircle, it's easy to take your time, pick how you want to destroy the fob and easily overwhelm the fob. I think what people don't understand is the kind of strength in that on the defensive side is that you're forcing them to push more assets into a number situation that is more favorable for your team on other sides of the map, because as the enemy team is pushing your FOB with a 2-to-1 advantage, you kind of have to work with that pressure. Sure, that fob isn't going to last forever, but while that fob is still up, you need to be able to talk to the other squad leads to quickly mobilize a move on some other part of the map while you have them distracted. And I think that's kind of where a lot of fobs fail, is because they'll just sit there and they'll get overrun without any pressure going outwards while they're being attacked.
Yeah, so you're thinking of the fob like a manpower sink for the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that at the moment too is a condition of how the game itself is actually played. I mean, in the future that's going to be completely valid. So you'll actually have an FOB that in itself will probably be a legitimate target for the enemy team. But at the moment where fobs are placed, the issue I see with it is that you're usually drawing enemy players towards an area that's critical for you to actually defend the flag at the same time. So it just depends where the FOB is sighted and what its purpose is. Like, absolutely, if you've got an FOB that's in a compound that's 200 or 300 meters on the wrong side of the flag, and the enemy is sinking manpower at it, then that's absolutely fantastic. To be perfectly honest, you'd want that, wasting their time over there. But at the moment, FOBs are usually placed in a position that's directly supporting the flag, and as we mentioned earlier, there can be no other FOB within 400 meters of that, and so it detracts from actually your defense, because you've made a target of the only spawn point that you've got in the vicinity. So I think what you're saying is absolutely legitimate, and I think that's going to become a much more valid tactic in 2 or 3 iterations of the game.
Right.
But at the moment, it's really frustrating, to be fair.
Yeah, I think it requires a lot more. I think this is kind of player behavior wise, as players learn, as squad leaders learn, as we get more comfortable working with one another, to kind of communicate, like, okay, don't build anything on this FOB, and to have other squad leader, and to be able to trust other squad leaders not to mess with your FOB, or to build a FOB somewhere else and to work with you, because it is a team game, and I feel like it's kind of fractured a little because there is no command role right now. I think with command role this will also help a ton, but right now it just feels like 9 separate people all doing their own things, rarely working together. That's pretty much how squad is playing right now. You have a 9-man element, they're doing something, someone else is doing something. They're rarely working in cohesion together, and I find that kind of odd. But at the same time, I hope that this gets fixed with the commander role, and someone can take control of the squad leaders and kind of organize the entire team.
And you mentioned about the FOB placement. So if it's like to the side of the map, like away from an active objective, GC, at that point it becomes a manpower sink if they attack that position that is not an active objective. Whereas if they FOB is on the objective, like a FOB on a flag, then it's kind of, you're not wasting any manpower by attacking that position, because you should be attacking it anyway. So that's another point we can discuss here, which is the on-flag FOB that I detest completely. Because again, like I mentioned, the same thing about, like, if you're defending from a static point, I've basically never found a FOB on a flag that I couldn't take down, because it's just, you have such a predictable position for the enemy, and you're already attacking a position you should be attacking, and you also get to attack their spawn point, and they won't have another spawn point within 400 meters, except rally points, of course, but they usually get overrun pretty quickly like that, and you can't use that FOB on the flag to spawn there when it's being attacked, because then you have to get out of that FOB area, out of that flag area that's usually surrounded, or at least heavily flanked by the enemy, and then you have to maneuver out of that FOB without getting shot. Then you have to reorganize your squad, and then you have to maneuver to attack any of the other enemy positions from there on. So it's really hard to defend that position from the flag. And I just find, like, the screening strategy of, like, you place yourself between the objective and the enemy, and you just have, like, lines of defense where you have a FOB that's like 200 meters away from the flag, and then you have your position 200 meters ahead of the flag again, and then you can get pushed back from that position to the flag, and you can defend on the flag, and then you can get pushed off the flag, and then you can still reinforce from that FOB to the flag again.
I think putting the FOB, I agree with your point at putting the FOB close to the point but not on the point. I think that's a very important concept that squad leaders need to understand. There were very few places and very few objectives where you could actually put a FOB on the flag and be okay with it. One of the ones that I would always do this to was back in, like, version 4 or version 5, no, version 4, would be the market on Korra, because it already has a base that's pre-built, and you could completely lock it down properly because the entryways were so limited. But that was one of the only ones that I would ever recommend putting a FOB inside the point. Otherwise, my general rule of thumb is put the fob near the point within the building radius, but outside of the cap zone. That was generally what I would do with fobs in these past couple weeks.
Yeah, and that's the police station, that with the fenced off area and the 2 entrances. I think it's cheesy.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't really have anything to add that hasn't been said. I mean, the best one I've seen recently is on First Light in the whatever the large construction point is in the middle of the flag. Storage site, that's it. Sorry. And players who had an insistence on putting an FOB in the warehouse in there,
terrible.
which has 1 entrance and 1 exit. Now, it was kind of feasible in the previous version where they could sort of wall themselves up into it, but even then, players on the outside could get to the point where they could stop the spawning on the FOB, so then you'd have a whole bunch of your team literally trapped inside a warehouse with 2 entrances.
And then just getting RPG'd and 40 mic blasts. It was just terrible, yeah.
So there's nothing more to be said about that. I mean, we already teach that in the basic squad leading course, but it seems to still persist out there in the community where a player puts a fob on a flag. I mean, and the other one used to be in the tunnels at Fortress, which could get overrun from above and below now. So I don't know, just don't do it. Just steer clear of it. There's so many reasons to not do it, and if you want to defend a flag and if you want a super fob, then put the fob 100 meters away, sight it on a decent position on top of a hill or something, and then go nuts from there. But just don't put it on the flag.
Yeah. With 0.6 area, the biggest recent addition, so to speak, to the fob system is the 50 cal. I heard you've placed 1 so far. So, any experiences using it or having it be used against you?
I think at the moment it's a bit of a fad because it's brand new and people have been waiting for it forever, and it's been talked about on Reddit and the forums as the first iteration of the vehicles. So the players are whacking them down in silly spots and then claiming that it's broken or like sniper bait or something like that. And when I said earlier that I have had 1 that works, it's not far from a lie. I haven't played too much of the recent version, but yeah, I've seen one that works, and I thought it was so good that I actually made a video out of it because it was perfectly positioned on Gorodok, looking straight down the river of the last flag, and we actually managed to stop a squad in its tracks simply because they were too far away to actually effectively re-engage the position. But yeah, I think the 50 at the moment is a bit gimmicky. It's not broken, but even in Project Reality, you don't see them used very much, to be perfectly honest. It just needs to be used where appropriate, not used for the sake of being used. I think that's the problem at the moment.
Yeah. It has a 60-degree arc, I think.
But yeah, I've actually used quite a few 50 cals. I've probably put down maybe 20 or 30 at this point. And with that, at the beginning it was kind of rough because, you got to learn where to put it down, where it's useful, where it's not. And a couple things that I've learned from this patch already and using the 50 cals is you can't put it at like very exposed positions. For example, on the top of hills, you don't want to put it there. You want to put the 50 cal in areas where you can control who sees the 50 cal, and you can kind of engage targets within a reasonable distance. Now, you don't want it facing like the entire map. You kind of want to lock down medium range targets, because if it's too close to a corner, let's say, players can just peek the corner and try to get you. But if you place it too far, then scopes have the advantage. So you need to kind of look for these areas and these arcs where you can kind of engage targets with the 50 cal, and you can see and players who are scoped are within visual range of the 50 cal, because otherwise, as you said, it becomes sniper bait. If it's too exposed, it's easily outmaneuvered. You have to just really, really think about where you put the 50 cal down, and just respect the arc that it has, the range that it has, and ensure that you're covering its flanks. You don't want to end up supporting the 50 cal too. The 50 cal's there to support the infantry, to support you. You don't want to get stuck, just like a FOB, babysitting an asset. You want to make sure that that asset's working for you, and it just goes. That's another thing with a lot of experience and just practice and just playing, is you'll learn, like, I'm looking at an area, is this a good place? Yeah, it's a good place. It's just a lot of experience, I think.
Yeah, it kind of has the same problem as the Project Reality one, where you have like you can basically just aim at the specific point in the 50 cal deployment in the PR, and you will hit the person in there. So you don't have like guess or anything. It's not hard to kill. So it's you just get in the 50 cal and get killed if there's a sniper. And there's two kinds. There's a bunker and a like an open one. I find like the hole in the front, like the bunker thing, to be the same as in PR. It's just too big, so it's too easy to hit from the sides and all that kinds of stuff. So you really have to like limit the how easily you can see into the 50 cal position.
Yeah, they should bring the roof
using
down.
the terrain and cover and stuff like that. Yeah. Because in I haven't really used the 50 cal so far. I've had it used against me a little bit, and it's kind of hard when it's shooting at you, but when you get out of that arc, it's like it's already defeated at that point, and especially people placing them on top of hills and all that kind of stuff. So, trying to get if you can see the entire map from the 50 cal, then the entire map can also see you.
Yeah, you see the funniest 50 cal locations on Kohat because they're on top of the desert plateaus and like everyone can shoot at it, but it's got such a limited arc. It's just terrible.
That's a good little tidbit of information there, and a decent piece of advice. If I can see it, it can see me. So you should always think about that. I mean, that's pretty simple to remember. If you're going to put something down, just have a look. So that ridgeline, that ridgeline, that ridgeline, I can all see them. Therefore, it's going to come back if someone gets up there. So yeah, I think that's a nice way to put it.
We had a couple of new maps added as well. One map added and Sumaribala extended a little bit. We have the old maps then and some new maps. Do you feel like the fob placement on the maps is getting predictable at this point?
Well, there's only certain places you can put them that work, really. I mean, I think like Logar has been played to death now, so people sort of know where they're going to be on that map. And to be honest, there's places you just can't put FOBs elsewhere, otherwise it becomes, it's not ideal for your team. So even if you're trying to be sneaky, I think I think it has become predictable. Recently with the extension to Cora, though, I noticed that the fob placement is getting a bit more inventive in there now, simply just because there's more space. But I mean, there's only even when we get vehicles, and even when the game sort of reaches final stages of development, there's always going to be the problem of the maps that players already know. There's going to be good spots and bad spots, and I don't think that's going to change.
I think definitely with a couple maps, simply because players aren't going to put FOBs in fields, or in the open, that already blacklists a lot of areas where a FOB won't be. And as time goes on, as Cheesy said, there are areas that players just know that's a good place to put a FOB, and there's no real way to really change that without randomizing every game with the points. But yeah, there's really no way to get around that. In regards to the maps with the most FOB variability, however, I feel like Fool's Road, even though how big it is, it still has like the least, because simply of how big it is and where the points are, there's only a few places you can really put the FOB. It's kind of ironic that such a big map has such limited FOB placements, simply because of the terrain and the placement of the objectives. But Gordo,
all the objectives are on hills, with the exception of train station and mine, which are in like holes. So you're either on a hill or in a hole, and that really limits where you can put your spawn point.
Yeah, and those flag placement really affect how you where you can place those FOBs, because do you have that layout on Fool's Road where you have the fortress and then the 2 points in the center, and you have train station or whatever, and you really just have that like a circle around those 2 points in the center where you have to have like a FOB, and if you want to have 2 FOBs around that area, you're suddenly very limited in where you can place that. And then you have like the fob, if you're on Lisha, on Fortress for instance, you kind of have to place it on either in the tunnels, or you have to place it up in the northeast,
Exactly.
because otherwise it's going to be flanked by the enemy and attacked. So I like Kohat, I think is really good at having, like, it's a 4K map, of course, so that's makes it a lot easier, but it's also has like its flags out in the line and so on, so it's a lot more places to place FOBs than that. And I also find on the first light, actually on that tiny little map, that there's a lot of variation in where the FOBs are placed there, because if you shift the position of the first FOB 100 or 200 meters, everything else gets shifted as well. So it has to. So you have to place it in all kinds of weird places.
I think, even though it's underdone at the moment, I think Insurgency still provides the opportunity for more interesting FOB placement. I don't like playing Insurgency at the moment because I don't think the game's in a position to make the game type work properly. But I played Insurgency on Cora the other day, and it was really, really good. The Insurgents had FOBs in places no one had thought of before. The Russians had FOBs in places we'd never thought of before. It was refreshing to have that map sort of reset and everything changed around again. So there's obviously scope for it to change. It just depends on the game type now, I think.
Yeah, I rarely play Insurgency. I just don't like the game mode. But how do you guys have any ideas of how FOB placements and stuff like that differs from the Assault and Secure versus Insurgency?
Well, it depends which team you're on, I suppose. Yeah. The insurgents can just flail them about pretty much with reckless abandon. I know that if you pay attention in the forums, you'll see that Plus's strategies had a fair bit of talk about it, where he will literally run towards the enemy spawn points and put FOBs down, and then just fight from the FOBs to try and cost the coalition team as many tickets as he can. So whether you agree with that tactic or not, that seems to be the way it's done for the insurgent team. And then in terms of the coalition side, it's pretty stock standard, the rules that you would use in AAS. Put a FOB that is in a decent position to support your attack on the objective, and then put another one potentially on the other side. Obviously the insurgent spawns move around and that kind of stuff, because they can come off different cache locations, but the rules for the coalition are pretty much the same. But the insurgents, it's a mixed bag and can be very interesting.
So we have in the future there will have a lot of additions to the game, where you have vehicles and a logistical system implemented, and that will drastically affect how FOBs work and how they're placed and so on. So there's a lot of discussion on the forums, for instance, about separating FOBs from the spawn points, or construction from the FOB and so on. And all the other kinds of things. So what are you guys thinking about the future implementation of the FOBs?
I'm hoping that with the addition of the logistical system and vehicles, I hope that there are fewer FOBs and that players are thinking more about the FOBs when they're putting them down, because there's fewer FOBs. I'm a sucker for limiting player assets, just because I think that it enforces, smarter, more tactical play, simply because you can't just go all willy-nilly and drop anything you like and use whatever you like. That's like one of the core principles in squad ops, is limiting of things so that you can use them in a better way and you have to think more. I think that's what makes that would make squad a lot more fun from my point of view, with the addition of logistics and the vehicles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think forcing the players to make a choice is important. You can't just have it all your own way all the time. It can't just be, we're going to do this and then we can do that and we can do this as well. It should be, well, if I do A, can I do B? And if I do A and B, then I'm not going to be able to do C. So do I do C and B and maybe A? There has to be choices and trade-offs, and it's one of those things that's not going to appeal to the wider audience, I think, because players are used to having it all their own way. And it's one of the more contentious things about a game like this is you literally can't do anything or everything that you want. So the logistics should hopefully force those choices. And I'm with you. I'd like to see less FOBs, but FOBs be more important because of that. So, a team actually has to invest time in defending a FOB if they put one down. Not necessarily super FOBing it, but if it's threatened, then yeah, it becomes a legitimate objective because you have to get a truck to build another one, for instance.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's exciting. Obviously the vehicles are gonna to change a lot, I think, and not initially, but as soon as you need logistics to move things around, it's gonna make it more interesting. One of the other points of contention on the forums at the moment was the view distance, and people are saying, well, if there's an unlimited view distance, it's going to be too easy to see where the enemy are putting their FOBs and stuff like that. Well, I mean, that's how it is in real life, and I think right now it's too easy to place a FOB that no one can see.
I personally,
so if you can see it, go on.
Oh, sorry. I personally feel like FOBs should be really visible. Like, it shouldn't just be this one little radio box. I feel like if you're gonna put down a FOB, it should be like almost a full building that's in like sight, because then it forces players to defend it, or like at least think, hey, if I put this here, it's gonna get spotted. Because if you make them small,
someone's gonna see it.
they're just mobile. They're just team rally points. Like, I think they should be made to be like actual big structures or something when you initially put it down. I think that would change it to I don't know, maybe they tested it and they decided, hey, that's a crap idea, but that's just my thought on that.
Well, I think the reason why they had a radio, so you can place it inside structures and so on. But I agree as well. I'd like to see something more like in PR, where you have like an actual structure that's like this bunker, yeah. So you have to like, you can't just place it willy-nilly, hide in a bush, yeah. So you have to think about, is this visible from what areas this is visible from, and think about that. And I think that's in terms of when you get logistics implemented, I think some stuff I'd like to see removed from the current FOB system is basically the 400 meter radius restriction. I'd like to see no restriction on that when we get logistics and vehicles involved. And I'd also like to see the FOB and construction tied to supplies instead of everything being tied to the FOB. So you can have, like, you take a supply crate to a position and you can build like 50 cals and stuff if you have the supplies there without necessarily building a FOB and stuff like that. Because I think that would be, if you have the construction tied to the FOB itself, you'll end up having like very limited use of those deployables, same as in PR. You rarely see like actually you have like tows, you have HMGs, you have AA placement, all that kind of stuff, and it's rarely used in the game because it's tied to the FOB, and you have like the place you want to build the FOB is not the place you want to have the AA or the towers or whatever like that.
And once again, if you have your limited number of crates on a massive respawn timer, and then you give the player a choice, you're going to build a spawn point or you're going to build a machine gun bunker with the additions to it. I think that's important, and that's a good idea.
Yeah, and that's also why I'd like to see like the 400 meter limit removed as well, because A, it just makes FOB positions predictable, and B, I'd like to see the construction of FOBs and all that kind of stuff limited by the supplies and the logistical ability of the team, instead of having like
a ticker,
artificial limits. So it's like you have supplies at the main base, and however fast the team can get those supplies out of the main base and spread out over the map to those areas where they need it, they should be rewarded for that, instead of having like restrictions based on basing it on the number of vehicles available or proximity and stuff like that.
I think I did actually read somewhere that they said, that building will be determined by the player, like the rate at which you can build. So how fast you can get certain supplies to a certain area will dictate your building rather than an artificial ticker. I think that was on the forum somewhere, not sure. But yeah, I do like that idea, because once again, it forces that limited asset kind of thinking model where you have to make a conscious choice over, do we put these supplies here? Do we put these supplies here? Do we split them 50-50, or do we put 75-25? So I think that'll also make the game a lot more interesting and a lot less, okay, we're waiting for the game to give us these amount of points.
Yeah. how about vehicles in terms of just the existence of actual attack vehicles like tanks and stuff like that? How that affect FOBs and stuff like that? Because I'm thinking they're talking about like more reinforced buildings to emplacement that could withstand like mortars and all that kind of stuff, and that's also a thing in the future. Mortars, artillery, how that will affect the FOBs, because how effective will, for instance, a fortified FOB position be when you have like tanks and mortars and stuff that can shell it?
Blue Drake 42 actually had a really good point about this, and it was that basically, you know, all the trees, all the buildings, every in-game asset, like map-wise, is indestructible, and that does prove to be, and it causes this interesting problem where you can't use tanks to like destroy cover or to destroy buildings, or if like there's a tree in front of your way, it's gonna stop your tank shell. It's proving to, like, I didn't think about it before until he mentioned it, and I realized that, you know, it's pretty true how like these buildings that are indestructible and these trees that are indestructible right now don't really prove much of a problem, but once we get heavier assets in there, like, is a tank gonna be able to knock over a tree, or is it gonna be blocked by like the tiniest shrub? Like it's, I don't know. I guess we'll see what they do with that, but I feel like it's gonna feel a little awkward with having a ton of trees that you can't drive through or shoot through, or buildings that you can't shoot down, like destroy. I don't know. We'll see, I guess.
I've never really thought of that before either, actually, so I'm just sitting here like considering trying to drive a tank through Gorodok and just hitting every fucking thing on the way through. Excuse the French, sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I think the dynamic when vehicles are introduced is the game's obviously going to change pretty significantly. I'm like, with as nicely as I can say it, I'm sort of dreading the first like couple of weeks where everybody, once again, like the 50 just jumps in the vehicle to see what it can do. But I mean, if I'm going to do that myself, so I can't really say anything bad about it. But I don't know. I think, well, I mean, without really speculating, we can sort of we know what we're going to get soon, which is the BTR, I think, and a couple of transport trucks and a Humvee. So, I mean, if we want to base this little discussion on what we're getting, I think their effectiveness is going to determine how effective the infantry weapons are against them, and I don't see these particular vehicles causing too much of an issue for the current meta. It's just going to force squads to be a bit smarter in how they move and how they choose to engage these targets, but I think I don't foresee the vehicles changing anything too dramatically, at least not in the next couple of months, maybe 6 to 12 months, until some real heavy assets actually come in. But what I am excited for is how they implement crewman kits and what you need to actually use them. So I assume you won't need one to drive a truck, for instance, but one of my favourite aspects of Project Reality was being an infantry squad leader and working really closely with armoured infantry, or armoured vehicles, having them as transport and then fire support, and that was the sort of teamwork that I couldn't get elsewhere. Armor didn't really do it right, and Project Reality, the scale was perfect, and the teamwork that you got from talking to the squad leader in the infantry fighting vehicle, directing his fire, then having to come and pick you guys up and move you around, I think I can't wait for that. That's what's really going to sell this game to a lot of people as well, I think.
And how about the transport capability of the vehicles? Do you think that will change FOB placement in the game now?
I think that's one of one of the factors that would probably change the most is with the added mobility. Like, I'm sure that'll bring a lot of different strategies. You know, you can get to this point much faster now, or, you know, you can loop around this point faster now. I think that'll bring up a lot of interesting flanks and a lot of interesting different fronts, rather than just the linear kind of fights that we're seeing right now. So I think that'll open up different parts of the map, hopefully. You know, being able to attack things from different sides at different times, because timing is pretty important in squad, I feel. So I don't know, I guess we'll see if that actually changes the meta at all.
Yeah.
timing I think is important at the moment because everybody can move so quickly. I mean, if we're going to talk about new changes coming up, I look forward to the speed slowing down just a little bit, that you actually have time to consider another move rather than, oh shit, like we've got to get to the forward cap before they neutralize the point behind us, and then it's just a dead sprint to the next flag. You know, I see that a lot at the moment, and that's sort of, I don't know, that it feels to me not how it should be. So with the introduction of vehicles, hopefully it all slows down a little bit. Like the run speed actually is decreased, I hope, is what's going to happen, and so we actually get a bit more time to make a considered decision about what to do next and why and how and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think if you have a very good point. If they kill the sprint meter in half and then you're mainly using vehicles to get around, I think that will actually slow the game down a lot. Even if you can get to places faster, simply because when you're in a vehicle, you're extremely exposed rather than having the squad spread out on foot. And so I think, I mean, in the first, as you said, as soon as vehicles are released, it's going to be a hell hole. But I think as squad leaders start to realize, all right, you know, we're in a freaking tin can here that makes a lot of noise. We're going to have to be careful about where we drive this thing. I think it will slow down the game. But yeah, timing will still be important, but not in the same way, if you know what I mean. Because at the moment, it's a timed sprint to who can get to the best position first. Exactly.
But hopefully we see timing in, you know, okay, we got our vehicle here in this time, and now, you know, dismount and spread out, and it's going to take us this long to get to the next point. Make sure the vehicle's still secure. Where's our rally point? Is there a fob over there? Instead of just sprint, fob, sprint, which it sort of is at the moment.
Yeah, and it is kind of a race all throughout the game currently, where you just if you're not running, you're probably moving too slow right now, because you have to just keep flanking and maneuvering around all over the map.
Plus, squad leaders will now have the other asset to worry about. So if they've got 2 or 3 players sitting in a vehicle and they want to move to the next point, then okay, guys, we're gonna have to come off the flag. You know, it's gonna take 2 minutes to reorganize each other, get in the vehicle, and then start moving, as opposed to 10 seconds to say, like, next point, let's go, and everybody just starts sprinting from where they are. So that in itself should also serve to slow things down, as people have to think about where their vehicle is, where they parked it, do they put it in a good spot, has it been destroyed, do they need another one, all that kind of stuff as well. It just adds another layer of complexity, and it's going to make it harder for squad leaders, which is, I don't know, it's a blessing and a curse, I suppose, and it's going to sort of make it more difficult for regular infantry, and hopefully we'll see a reduction in RPG spam and stuff like that, because now those guys are going to have actual targets.
Yeah,
and
choices again.
Let me tell you, exactly right. If I'm leading a squad and my RPG gunner has wasted his rockets on like 2 infantry on a hill that's 500 yards away, I'll be like letting him know not to do it again, because, you know, when the Humvee rolls around the corner, RPG, where are you, mate? He's like, oh, I haven't got any. Like, remember those dudes on that hill miles away? Ah, yeah, it's not V6 anymore, dude. Go back to the ammo point, get some rockets, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's gonna, I don't know. A lot of. I said earlier, I'm just going to contradict myself. I said earlier that there's not going to be too much change to the meta. True, I suppose, but then there's going to be like a lot of little micro changes to the way that people play their roles.
Yeah, it'll get a lot worse before it gets better. That's for sure.
Yeah, and we'll see how they implement it in terms of like how many vehicles are available, how are they made available, what requirements are there, and stuff like that. So, because if they like have like 5 BTRs on the map, that will be a lot more different than if it's just 1 or 2.
I suppose it depends on how many have weapons as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I can't wait for the fighting on like squad leader chat as well. There's people accusing each other of taking each other's vehicles and stuff, and they're like the dude who sits in the loading screen for 15 minutes with his like CAS squad ready to go as soon as squads are available to be created.
I'm dreading it. I'm dreading it. People just going like the first person that gets in, oh yeah, no, this is mine now, and then people not wanting to roll with that and just TKing each other. Oh dear God.
Yeah.
Server admins. It's gonna get harder for server admins.
Yeah.
I remember being admin on PRTA and PR. A lot of it's extremely easy for people to just screw everything up with a little decisions about how they deserve the vehicle better than somebody else.
People.
Yeah. Fuck them.
Fucking people.
Well, I think we've got most of the FOB stuff covered here, unless you got anything else to add.
No, I think we've probably run out of time as well.
Yeah. Give a departing advice here now to people about FOB construction and stuff, everybody.
Don't put FOBs on flags.
Yeah, don't put FOBs on flags. Just experience. Just realize what you're doing wrong and right after a certain time. Make sure you're trying to learn every game, and after 500 hours, hopefully you'll know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Trial and error works this way as well. And also, don't. There's a lot of strong personalities in the community out there, and if someone rubs you up the wrong way, I think it's best just to ignore it and move on. And if someone starts yelling at you for whatever reason, just do your best to explain why you did what you did, and maybe admit that you made a mistake and just move on from that. I think that's the other thing, because the game really is about the community, and with the community, obviously, it's made up of a whole bunch of people with a whole bunch of different opinions and strategies and priorities and
Egos.
I don't know. Yeah, and egos. Yeah, so there's going to be conflict. There's going to be more conflict the more this game progresses. I guarantee it. So yeah, that's it. Don't put FOBs on flags. Last point.
Yeah. And remember, don't put FOBs on flags.